Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward. Chapter 89. Asric allowed the deft hands of the servants to dress him in a suit of rich burgundy, slashed with cream. He bent and moved to accommodate their administrations with the ease of a man who had grown up with servants from birth. One of the men adjusted the fine clothes about him, and he caught himself returning to the memory of the young woman. She had been unusual. Unusual was often dangerous, he had found over the years. Was she one of the assassins he so feared? He didn't know. If she was, then it had been a severe slip to alert him to her presence. No assassin would be so foolish as to make such an obvious blunder. If not an assassin, then what was she? Nothing more than a menial servant? He laughed softly. The servants ignored him and continued their work. It was not their place to comment, nor to speak. He had cultivated the servants who he allowed within his chamber, within his inner keep, on a very strict set of parameters. He had some small measure of faith in Dovelle, the current mistress of servants. She had only to look to the fate of her predecessor for encouragement to take her job seriously. He had executed the last master of servants on the suspicion of espionage. His spy masters had been reasonably certain. It had been enough for him to act. There was no benefit in waiting to be proved wrong, and little price if they had been wrong in their assessment of the man. To Asric, he was simply acting to his own benefit. He cared nothing for the lives of those under him. They were only a means to an end. He suspected many of them knew that. More than anything, that simple fact made them all the more assiduous in their duties. As the servants finished their work, he regarded himself in a long stand mirror that had been commissioned specifically for his family, and had been crafted by a master artisan who resided in the merchant quarter of the city. The bright surface reflected a square-jawed man, the chain of silver hammers dangling from his neck, proof of his station. His coronet set off burgundy finery he now wore. The cut was fine, but showcased his wide shoulders and frame. He had always been well-muscled, a gift from his father. He loathed the man, and was glad he was dead. He remembered living in the man's shadow, waiting and scheming for the day the fool would finally die to the drink that he courted day and night. There were a slew of bastard children that had been seen to, many who were killed while the man still lived. He would not relinquish his power to such a mistake. His hands were already black with the deeds he had done. Pity was a weakness, and he could not afford weakness now. He was hunted and could not see the dagger that waited for him. He had no use for pity. Asric let his mind drift to happier times as he crossed the mirrored hallway towards the great hall, before people had feared him, before they had known to fear him. He remembered the first woman Calian had brought him. She had been a baker's daughter. He remembered her sandy hair. Calian had tried to teach him how to court a woman. None of it would matter someday, but Asric had allowed himself to take part. Calian had urged him to use lines that sent his heart racing. They were far too expressive than the young woman had deserved. The young woman had been excited to meet the two men. She had worried over her father finding them, but had giggled with glee at Calian's introduction. Asric had taken her with Calian. It was an act his father had laughed about, and had encouraged him to handle on his own. Asric remembered coming upon his father and one of the chambermaids in the midst of their throes. The maid had laughed wickedly when his father had chided him for not laying with a woman yet. The anger seared through him. He had done it mechanically, but Calian had taken great joy from the pursuit of young women. Asric had enjoyed watching the other man's attempts at courting young women. Calian had a joy that Asric could not hope to match. He was coy and brash with women, but never forceful. They always came to him willingly. As Asric grew into a man, he kept appearances up by taking mistresses to his chamber, but made them short affairs, to be done with and forgotten. He paid special care now that he was hunted. Any woman he took to bed could be an assassin. He would not fear the loss of company. He thought again to the piercing stare the young woman had given him in his chambers. She was different somehow. Brushing aside the grand oak doors, he entered the vacuous room.